All right. So I should be on Instagram, but I should also be on YouTube and Facebook as well. So there's two different cameras here. I'll decide which one do I look better in. I'm feeling very French today, thus the little French scarf in my hair. Got some scarf action going on here. Speaking of France, as many of you know, I split my time between here in the United States and my home in France. But I also want to let you know that we have for years now done a acting science retreat in the south of France. And this year is, oh my goodness, I've really outdone myself. So this year, I actually booked a 13th century Cator castle. Yep, that's right, the real castle deal. So this is going to be absolutely phenomenal, and it's almost sold out already. So I think y'all are just as excited about it as I am. If you're one of the people going, make sure you drop a comment in there about what you're most excited about. I'm most excited about working together in person with those of you who are going to be attending the retreat. The retreat is from September 11th through the 19th this year. It'll be the fourth retreat that I've done, and most likely the last retreat in France. We have plans of a new location and several other new locations going forward. But the CMFA Acting Science Retreat is a really special, wonderful time where I get to work with you in person and bringing all of the principle of acting science method into an environment where you can work hands-on. So one of the things that's, I think, challenging in the online world in teaching is to teach chemistry, to teach what it's like to interact with another actor. And that's one of the many things that we're going to be doing in the retreat in France, is giving you that experience, almost like an on-set experience, but giving you that experience of working your acting science principles into your acting work in person. What is acting science? Well, I see some new people in here that have no idea the superpower that is acting science. So let me just kind of give you a brief rundown of what acting science is. So I've been a casting director for over 25 years, and I don't cast that many projects anymore, maybe one or two movies a year. As many of you know, my lovely and very accomplished daughter, Bella Hibbs, took over Good Faith Casting a number of years ago and is doing an incredible job. So if you're not following her already, make sure you do that at Good Faith Casting. So I worked in that industry, but what a lot of people don't realize is before that, I worked as a deception detection expert. Deception detection is the ability to read body language and be able to reasonably determine if that person is lying or not. And nobody lies more than an actor, right? Because those words on the page are not really yours. What I can do with acting science is I'm able to give you scientific ways, working with the brain, to help you actually trick yourself, trick your brain into believing that it is true, that it's really happening in your real life, making it feel like you're very much in the zone, allowing you to express emotions without having to traumatize yourself, so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about acting science. Everything that I teach is based on scientific principles, not just my opinion. I think that, I mean, I'm not an actor, but if I was an actor, I would be really frustrated with the fact that a lot of casting directors teach workshops, and whether it's intentional or just by default, a lot of actors feel like they have to take these workshops in order to be seen by that casting director. And that just shouldn't be that way. You should be taking those classes in order to learn. But definitely there is this kind of feeling and concept. And I think what's even more problematic with those types of workshops is that much of what you are getting from them is their opinion. And then you go to another one and they're like, oh, well, do it this way. I'll do it this way. And you're getting all of these different opinions. So what I teach you in acting science is based on science. It's not based on my opinion. Granted, I also am able to combine that with 25 years of casting experience, which really allows you then to, gain that practical wisdom as well as that scientific wisdom. So let's see what kind of comments we're getting in here. So obviously many of you all have studied with me before and know firsthand. Oh, thank you, Mabel, the scarf. Yeah, I actually collect the silk scarves. I find them so fun. You can do so many things with them, but it's, like I said, feeling very French. So coming in from Albuquerque. I used to live in Albuquerque. I still kind of live in Albuquerque, just not all the time. All right. So yeah, it's got some nice little things in here. So tell me what's going on in your lives. What questions do you have that I can help you answer? Let's see. Hi, how are you? Actor. Will you write a book? God love you for reminding me. Yes, actually the book is finished. It's in the editing process. And yes, I'm very, very excited to have that. I'm actually hoping to have the book in hand and ready to share with you all by the retreat, which again is in September. But a lot of people obviously are not going to be at the retreat. So the very next event that I do as soon as I get back from France for the retreat is the Southwest Actors Conference in Arizona. And so I'm going to be speaking at that. Tickets are available, by the way, so check that out and would highly recommend that you go to that. But I'm going to be speaking at that, and I'm hoping to have the book available in hand for that. So it's been a long time coming. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So every time that I think I'm finished, I realize, oh, but there's so much more I could share. Like one of the things I pride myself in having is a very content rich course, and not just the basic stuff that you can read online, but real usable, practical information. And this just, because science is always evolving, it's sort of this never ending process. But I realized that if I just get what I have already on paper, I could always have second editions or additional books, Hello, Sholina. Thank you. Oh, the longer class for the scary characterization. That's really interesting that you ask that. So I started doing these special topics classes. They're once a month, and they're topics that as of right now, I don't feel warrant a 4-week or longer class. And so I just teach them as a 1-day, 1-night only class. And some of the topics that I've done this year have been how to kiss in an audition, when it's a self-tape, a little awkward, but I talk about how to use body language to communicate that. And so that was one of them. I just did procedural dramas, which, by the way, was so popular and totally sold out very, very quickly. The procedural, how to audition for procedural dramas, that one I'm actually added back to the calendar. So if y'all missed that, or the date wasn't right or whatever, you can actually get in on that. So there's going to be another one at the end of this month. This month's regular special topics class is secret meaning of hand gestures, how every hand gesture means something, because body language was our primal language. So everything that we do with our hands has its own meaning. And I talk about how you can utilize those meanings into your characterization, into the context and the emotional fluency of the scene, and use that science to your advantage. But to answer your question, Shalina, Is there going to be a full class on it? The closest class that I have is the extreme characterization class, which we just missed. So there'll be another one of those coming up probably in about 3 or 4 months. Those classes are 4 weeks long. So to answer your question. All right. Oh, hello, Jason. So it says, I booked a co-star on Chicago PD that airs this Wednesday. I had some postcards printed up to send out to CDs that I've read for. No question right now, other than, do you think that sending them is okay? Well, that is a question. And yes, I do think it's okay. You've got to have those points of contact. You've got to have that marketing, which, by the way, social media makes it so easy now to have non-pushy points of contact. So there's this old marketing rule called the 7 points of contact. And we all kind of lived by it back in the early early days, right? Because you would, as business owners, you would maybe take an ad out in a newspaper, or you'd put something on the radio, or you'd go to a networking event. But in general, people don't buy until they've had 7 points of contact with a brand. So if you're looking at like Verizon telephone, for example, maybe you see a billboard, then you see their YouTube video, then maybe you hear a radio ad, or it pops up on your phone. Like, it's usually about the 7 contact you have that you gain enough psychological trust with that consumer that they feel confident enough to buy. And I think the same is just definitely true with actors. When you're marketing yourself psychologically, you've got to understand that until you gain their psychological trust, they're not going to buy in. I mean, lots of people come in and go out of this industry. They want to know that you're serious. They want to know that you are dedicated. Obviously, you have to be talented. I mean, I teach you, what to do in an audition, and you've got to be talented, but you've also got to know how to market yourself. I mean, that's just as important. But you got to do it in such a way that you're not obnoxious, right? You're not obnoxious, and it's so easy to pass that line. So I think that that's a really valid question, and I appreciate you asking it, because I'm sure other people think that as well. Like, should I do this? Here's the thing, though. I think it's a good idea to send postcards. You're not going to get a response. They're not going to say, "Oh, thank you for your postcard." And also be careful, because post-pandemic, a lot of, with, all these auditions going online, a lot of casting directors gave up their offices. So be careful you're not accidentally sending the postcard to a personal address, and that can happen. So be careful with Google. But otherwise, I think that's a really super idea, and I would definitely encourage that. Another point of contact can be social media. Positive and supportive comments on their social media is a really great way to do it. It's everybody looks at their comments. Frankly, I don't care how big or important someone is. Everybody's looking at their social media comments, particularly on sort of their social media of choice. And if you ask casting directors, like if you get a chance to go to a networking event, or you get a situation where they're answering questions, ask them, where do you most like to play? And then focus in on that, focus in on, if they're big on Instagram, then make comments on Instagram. But everybody likes that. Everybody wants to see those comments. More than just liking the post, write a little comment, anything, because people read that. I don't know too many people who actually analyze who actually liked their post. They kind of look at how many likes they got, maybe, but they don't like see, did so-and-so like my post, unless it's a scary, stalker X or something, then maybe you're looking. But for the most part, you're looking at those comments, and everybody needs encouragement. So casting directors love that positive feedback. It's like, You don't necessarily hear from anybody when you're doing a great job, but when you're not doing a good job, that's when you hear from people. So be the opposite. Give positive feedback when they are doing something positive and interesting. Obviously, social media is not a place to just ask, "Are you casting anything?" That would be an inappropriate question to ask, and kind of awkward. Kind of puts them on the spot. You never want that. Kind of cringy. So Tara and Shalina, looks like you're going to be on the list for extreme characterization, which, by the way, in terms of telling a little bit more about what that class is, again, that is the 4-week version, but really talks about those characters when you're going beyond who you naturally are. So whether it's playing a villain or just some kind of really extreme, over the top type of personality. And how to deal with that, how to use acting science, body language, and to have the best communication impact possible in your audition. Oh, it's so nice to see you all. There's not a lot of you on here just right now, but that's okay. Message your friends, let them know that I'm on and I'm taking questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about our special topic this month and some of the trends, some of the things that I have seen kind of going on in the business. Let's start there, actually. Let's talk about some things that I've been seeing going on. I have a casting director friend. She's in Los Angeles, and she jokes about serial class takers. And it kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier, where I said that, a lot of actors feel like they need to make their rounds taking classes with casting directors, and how, that really isn't benefiting them in quite the way that it should. And it feels an awful lot like paying for an audition, frankly. So the big thing for me there is just getting content. But serial class takers, often it's like, what is your motivation in training? Is your motivation in training to network, to meet as many new teachers or casting directors as possible, or is it to learn? And so she calls them serial class takers, with this like endlessly long list of all the different classes. And so, like I said, I'm not casting all that much these days, really focusing in on promoting this method. I've been touring all around the world. But I keep in contact with a lot of my peers. I keep in contact with a lot of casting directors, and we've been talking about this lately. So I thought, in terms of a trend, I like this trend, and I thought I would share this with you. So it's an important little tip. So what my casting colleagues are telling me is that, okay, so post-pandemic, during the pandemic, and everything went online, it really created this unique opportunity for actors to be able to study with anyone. It wasn't like, oh, who's teaching classes in my market? You could take classes online with anybody. And that was really a glorious time. But again, because of that, we were sort of developing this, serial class takers, like I said. So what a lot of my casting colleagues will tell me of what they're kind of looking for now on a resume, is they're looking for how long you studied with that particular teacher or under that particular method. So for example, for a lot of you who have studied with me now for years, you would put that on your resume. So you would put the training, and in parentheses, you would put 9 years, 3 years, 2 years. But they're really looking for how it is that, what kind of dedication do you have to that training method? Just skipping around from class to class isn't all that effective. I'm also going to talk to you and tell you, you just can't get what you need skipping around. You can't get what you need even if you come to me and then skip around. And the reason is not because I'm not teaching you great stuff, great usable techniques that you can use in your auditions, but because of what is called in science the forgetting curve. And so many of you have heard me talk about the forgetting curve, but a scientist studied this, and they did lengthy research on this. And here's what you need to know. Within a week, you have lost 90% of what you learned within a week. So 50% is in the first 24 hours of you learning it. So if you took a class with me, one class, 10 years ago, the chances of you remembering anything is very, very slim. So the only way that you can combat that is practice. And why this forgetting curve is, well, because your brain is not designed to remember. In fact, this is why it's hard for memorization, right? Your brain is actually not designed to remember. You bring in 200 trillion bits of sensory data every single second of every single day of your life. And the amount that you retain is 2,000. So you go from 200 trillion to 2,000 bits of sensory data that you remember, even briefly. That's what you process. So your brain is actually designed to forget. It's just the way that it manages such a huge volume of sensory data. What does the brain prioritize? Well, the brain prioritizes information that is good for your survival and is good for your evolution, because your brain does those two things. How does the brain know if you think this is good for survival or evolution? It's stuff you're using, because your brain is like, okay, if she's using it, if he's using it, well, this must be something I need. I must need this. So us speaking every day and knowing what to say and knowing the language in which we communicate in, our brain prioritizes that information because we use it. We use it every single day of our lives. But information that we don't use, we lose, literally. So if you're not practicing, if you're not studying on a regular basis, if you're not practicing what you've studied on a regular basis, if you're not reviewing it, if you're not utilizing it, obviously in your auditions, you are going to use those skills. That means that whatever amount of money you paid back whenever you took that class is really money lost. It wasn't an investment, because that information most likely is gone. Now, you don't necessarily have to come back and actually take the classes again or continue studying. You would have to, at a bare minimum, review your notes and practice those things on your own time. Ideally, according to precision training, you would do that with the expert that taught those things to you in the first place. So beat the forgetting curve. A lot of you, I actually sent Mabel, I can see here, she's in this, but I have obviously everybody has to start off with the 8-week film auditioning workshop. But after you've done that, don't just do that and be done. After that, you want to do the practice club. So each month, on the first Tuesday of every month, both in the morning and in the evening now, there are 2 classes, 2 hours long, where you could just come back and practice all the wonderful acting science gems that you learned in that 8-week course. You can come back and you can practice that. So, and it's super cheap. You can drop in at $60 US dollars, and you can be on subscription for $47 a month, which is super, super cheap. That is just something that I do because I don't want to see you lose the good work that you started. All right. So over here on Facebook, I have a question. Let me take a look at this. Okay. Yeah, I will speak to this. So Michael has this question. He says, I finally learned that too much overthinking an actor does on his, her do's and don'ts can be self-defeating. Just do your best and let the rest take care of itself. What's your thoughts on that? Well. Michael, I can really understand this from the perspective of most training programs. So many training programs are having you do this deep dive into, what does my character want? What did my character eat for breakfast and backstory and all this stuff. Um, with those kind of training methods, how can you be thinking about all of that when you are supposed to be in the moment, in the character, and remembering everything that you have to remember for the audition? So I get it from that standpoint. It's like do the work and then just let it go. But from the practical things and the communication aspects that I teach, it isn't as easy as just letting go. What we want to do is we want to make those things muscle memory so that you don't have to think about them, that you can just roll with it. And here's the example that I use. The example that I use is this. All right, when we're teaching our teenager to drive a car, we're not going to sit the teenager behind the wheel and be like, all right, just go with the flow, get out of your head, go with the flow. Be in the moment, less is more, good luck. No, we don't do that. That would be kind of devastating. What we do is we teach that teenager first how to drive, right? When you're going too fast and you need to slow down, take your foot off of the acceleration and put it on the brake. Now, I know that sounds really very basic, but that's probably because, Michael, you know how to drive. But if you didn't, that would not be basic. When you're communicating, when you're having, when you're in an audition, you want your communication impact to be as good as possible. You want to make sure that what you are communicating is having that impact on the person who's ultimately judging you. So you feeling, all cool and in the moment and going with the flow and not overthinking might on that outside show a performance that they resonate with, but it might not. And if you don't know what they're seeing, if you don't know how it may be impacting them, then that's really dangerous. That's really dangerous. And I like to call those sort of experiences hoping for happy accidents. Hoping for happy accidents, because it could be that you get out of your head and you're just kind of, let me just go with the flow, and it can be a disaster because you really haven't thought through what you might be communicating and how you might be communicating it to the person who's making the decision about you when they watch it. So you may feel really good about it, but it may not be at all what they're looking for. So instead of relying on happy accidents that not only can't be predicted, but they also can't be repeated. There's no consistency. If the director calls you in and says, like, I loved what you did in your self-tape, that was awesome, do it again. You're like, I don't know, what did I do? But when you go in with a communication plan, you know what you need to accomplish to create neural coupling. And neural coupling is kind of a fancy word for bonding, but essentially anytime you're in a communication environment, whether it be an audition or whether it be a job interview or whether it be a first date, whatever it is, there are certain things scientifically that have to be accomplished for you to get to that point of neurocoupling. The good thing is science will always answer that question. So what I've done is take that and apply it to your auditions so that you can hit those things that will make a difference on the decision maker. So that's a long answer to a question, but that's one I've heard quite a bit. Then it can be muscle memory. Just again, going back to the analogy of driving, at first, if you're asked to do specific things, if first when you're taking that corner just a little too wide, it's, slow down, and you slam on the brake, well, that's going to feel a little clunky. it took us all a while. It took us all a while to get really fluid with our driving. But once we did, once we knew how to drive and once we became fluid in our driving, then then we were able to just kind of relax and let it go. Like, one of my favorite times to drive is on the highway. I do a lot of traveling, been doing a lot of traveling this year for the CMFA outreach tour. And it's a good opportunity for me to work on my French, make some phone calls, think about all those things I want to say to people, like maybe eat a sandwich, all these things you do, right? Because now you're no longer thinking about it. So I think the best way to get out of your own head is to really be fluid with what it is that you need to do to get your optimum outcome in an audition. And as you can tell by what I'm saying, I'm not a big fan of backstory and kind of overworking that kind of aspect of it. All into the science, baby. All right. I'm going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. See some first-time commenters. So yeah, if you have a question, let me know what your question is. Sorry, it just takes me a little while to read it. Some people probably can read and talk at the same time. That wouldn't be me. Angel, I want to address this. So she says there are agents that won't sign you if you've only trained with one or two coaches. I've heard this from lots of actors. I'm curious to know if that's agents in a local or regional market, or if that's agents in a major market such as Los Angeles, New York, or even Chicago, Toronto, places like that. But here's what I have to say about this is that may be what they're saying to you when they look at your resume and they see that you haven't taken classes with somebody that they find reputable, or that they know the training is good. You know what I mean? So it's like they look at it and like, yeah, you need a few more. Because what they want to see is, what directors want to see. That ultimately is the most important thing, right? It's what casting directors and directors want to see on your resume. Frankly, casting directors aren't all that impressed with casting director workshops on a resume. Again, going back to that subject, but it's like, oh, great. So you took all of these people's and they know that there's, they know the scoop. So that isn't going to do a whole lot. But it's very possible that that agent is actually responding to a specific, they're looking at your specific training and saying, maybe I need to see more. And sadly, some agents actually encourage you taking casting director workshops just to be seen. I'm going to be very outspoken here because I ain't got nothing to lose. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay. Casting directors can teach very well. There are some that teach very well. But a lot of them don't. There, I said it. A lot of them don't. A lot of them have absolutely, if not nothing, to teach. But agents kind of get sucked into that trap as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on that for what it's worth. Yeah, learning a hodgepodge of different methods, especially when they contradict each other. It's difficult to get signed by an agency, so any advice? Yeah, lots of advice on that. So, it's a lot harder, I think, in the bigger markets, harder and easier. I mean, there's more agents in the bigger markets. But they're harder to get into. So with your local markets, getting an agent, a lot of times that comes down to networking events. I did a poll, I want to say about like a year ago, asking people how they got their agent. And the number one answer from that was networking events. But again, it kind of goes back to that 7 points of contact. So, all right, so maybe you send in either by mail or virtually. I mean, everything is virtual really these days, but there are a few outliers, little old-fashioned people who are still asking for hard copies. A lot of trees there. But so you submit your headshot and your resume, and maybe you know you have a friend that's with that agency that puts in the good word for you. Then you run into them at, say, the Southwest Actors Conference. Each time you're posting on their social media, each time you have that point of contact, you're building trust. Now, if they're not interested in you, they're not interested in you. And frankly, if there's not anything at all on your resume or training that they trust, it really isn't you're just going to have to get that experience and keep adding to it. I will say this: if you if you do the rounds and you get rejected by all the agents, work on your training, work on getting experience, and then circle back within 6 months and try again. Agents probably hate me for saying that because I'm like, no. But the fact of the matter is, if you're adding, not if you don't add, but if you're adding to your resume, maybe there's a significant reason why 6 months from now they would be interested in you. Whereas maybe they weren't interested before because there really wasn't anything of substance. Or maybe they had someone else like you in their agency. You don't want to have what I call inter-agency competition. So a lot of agents are like, oh, I already have that look and that type. So I don't need anybody else like that. Well, maybe that person left, or maybe they got rid of that person. So continue to circle back, but have those points of contact, those 7 points of contact. And I can't tell you, it's so easy now with social media to be able to do that. Oh, why don't I like backstory? All right. So quite simply, backstory from a neuroscience perspective. Remember, my educational background is in behavioral psychology and later then in neuroscience. And from a neuroscience perspective, our history is not, it's part of who we are, but it isn't in our minds. For instance, my childhood, losing my teddy bear when I was little is not in my mind right now. It's not processing my emotions right now. So you can create this whole backstory, but it doesn't impact that moment-to-moment communication that you have, that you're simulating in that conversation that you're having in the audition. What your character ate for breakfast doesn't help you make a better choice in an audition. What makes the best choices in an audition is what I call, well, not what I call, but just what is called emotional regulation. But my application of emotional regulation and how the brain actually processes emotion, when you simulate that in the believable pattern that is true of real life and the way our brains work, that's what's going to have the most judgeable impact. So let me kind of back up too and talk about this a little bit. So most people do backstory because they want to see something on camera that shows that backstory. Well, how do you show that your character ate, eggs and bacon for breakfast? You really can't. But you can show the moment-to-moment emotion of that character. Now, how that's done, this is one of the biggest mistakes in the acting industry, is that most acting teachers are teaching emotional regulation in the wrong order. And that's really where body language and my studying of body language and the science behind it is so impactful, because that is what's really going to communicate what your emotions are. I've said this many, many times, but 85% of our communication impact is based on visual. And of course, a big part of visual is your body language. 9% is the meaning of words. 6% is how you say them. And that, of course, visual is 85%, 15 is vocal. But most actors, what they do is they get a script, those preformed words, and they focus on memorizing those and playing around with the delivery of it. But if you add those two numbers up, 9 plus 6, folks, if you're good at math, 15%. So you're really only working on the 15% communication impact, whereas you've got this whole other 85%. And again, most teachers are teaching things, they're kind of teaching the backwards way of getting to a visual performance, in that they're teaching things like backstories, so that in the hopes that we might see something. What I teach is body language coding, that we want to see what we need to see to communicate certain emotions, which we're all familiar with. We all know and read body language at some level. And then we're guaranteed that that's going to get communicated. Backstory might get you to that end, but it also might not. Again, it goes back to what I was telling our friend here, Michael. Happy accidents, maybe, woohoo, it might happen, but, maybe not. So if backstory really is only as good as how you implement it into your performance. And frankly, I think it's a lot of work for not a lot of payoff. And it's hit or miss at best. Thank you. I see some nice compliments in here. My little French scarf. Again, everyone, if you're just joining, don't forget the CMFA Acting Science Film Acting Retreat in the south of France, just outside of Carcassonne, is September 11th through the 19th, and it is almost sold out. We are staying just us in a 13th century castle with a private chef and lots of amazing training and exciting excursions. Last retreat, we went to, we took an excursion where we drove to the coast, the Mediterranean Sea, and did sailboat lessons, which was absolutely mesmerizing and exciting. So that is what we've got coming up. All right, folks, it was great to hang out with you. Happy May. Don't be a stranger. Let me know what's going on. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. You can get in contact with me through email, faith@cmfatraining.com. And I will see y'all on the flip side.